This episode of Gabbing with Gaby is brought to you by the Breeders Direct Seed Company. In my opinion, the Breeders Direct Seed Company is your premier source for clones and seeds, and they are the only place that you can get the Gaby Staten Island collection. So visit Breeders Direct for all your seed and clone needs. What's up, everybody? This is Gaby Staten Island doing the Gabbing with Gaby podcast with my co-hosts, Nick Wolf and Cosmic Charlie. We're also joined today by Notso Dog, who's helping us out with this interview. Also, Notso Dog, just watch your positioning on the screen because you're cutting off your face a little bit. You might want to put the camera back a little bit and center yourself a little bit that way. Yeah, that's better. And then we got my good friend Mike, who's also known as the Weasel or Clop. We're going to ask him why and how he got that nickname. But one of the main focuses of this podcast for me is to tell my story. And Mike is a big part of the story. We're going to get into it. And also, he's the guy that created the Sour Diesel. So let's get started. One more time. Notso Dog, you're cutting off your face.
I am.
Yeah, it's hard to see sometimes. Like, you're not centered.
I'm hunched. Now I'm like a hunchback over here.
Just center yourself a little bit that way. No, you have plenty of headroom, but you just need to move over that way a little bit.
This way?
All right, that's better.
All right, fine.
All righty, so let me start by saying the Weasel, Mike, he's a longtime friend of mine, and I'm super excited to have him on this podcast, and lots of people have been asking for it, so here we go. So, Mike, I want to start by us telling the story about how we met. I know we've discussed it a little bit in the past, but you want to just start off and tell a story about how we met?
It was, I believe, fall of 92, right after the Dead shows at Madison Square Garden.
It was 91.
Garden. Okay, 91. That's what
Not a big deal. I was just already in California in 92.
Okay. But you were going back and forth. But let's wait a minute. All right. So
It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
I was sitting on my back steps, we'll put it this way. And just I was spun from the show last night. How about that? And some hippies walking by, and he shoots me a peace sign, hit him back with one, and he turns around, comes walking over, and asks me, if I needed any buds, anything else. And I was like, yeah, I'll smoke some weed with this guy, And he goes, hey, I have two friends that are around the corner. I said, all right. He says, is it all right if they come over? I said, can I go meet them? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, we're walking. We're in the town, Eltonville, on Richmond Avenue and the train station. And there's this guy. He's got long black hair. He's got one single dreadlock. A lot of purple on. And he's with a girl. And they're sitting by the edge of the street, and they introduced me to him. Next thing we know, we're up at my house. These guys are camping out for a week. I had a great time, and we hooked up, and we started talking about weed and growing, and, ideas, the wheels were rolling right then. Let's put it that way.
So the way I remember it is that we showed you some indoor weed, and you had never seen indoor weed before. You had grown outdoors like for
Correct.
over a decade, but that was the first time you ever saw some like indoor kind bud. And I remember you saying, "You can grow this inside." You were just shocked and amazed.
Yeah,
And
I was shocked and amazed. But I wasn't like really growing a lot. Like I'd grow 1 or 2 plants outside. So for saying to grow them for 10 years, it's, and you're only doing it a little bit here and there. But, so yes, you put the wheels were rolling right there. I'm telling you, the wheels were rolling upstairs. And I went and I got a book. Like, all my friends laughed at me. I started growing in the closet. But you would
Well,
bring
actually,
around
before the closet, it was the fish tank. Remember?
that I don't remember.
Okay, so let me remind you, because that's what's great about having multiple people here. Is that so? What I remember is you planted your first seeds in a fish tank. Okay, like you just put some soil on the bottom of a fish tank, and you put some seeds in there, and your cat kept digging it up.
Oh my God, you're right. You're right, the black cat, because he thought it was a litter box. That's funny. You're right.
So that's what I was telling Notso Dog and everyone. Like, I love having these conversations with people because we all remember different stuff.
Yeah.
And so I will never forget how mad you were at that cat, because like
I think
he did it twice, not just once. He did it twice.
But the thing is like, I think seeds were hard to come by, like good seeds.
Yeah, sure.
And the cat was disrupting them. And then I think even when I put them in the containers or whatever else I started to learn how to do, he was still digging them out. You know what I'm saying? And the cat had to go eventually.
I mean, in the cat's defense, there's probably significant overlap between like an indoor litter box and a nice smoothed out bunch of soil in the bottom of a fish tank.
Yeah. Smelling clean, the soil. Definitely. Yeah.
So what I tell people is that, I inspired you to plant those seeds and to grow your original plants in the closet. But after that, you were the one that inspired me to grow. So like we inspired each other. Like I had, seen indoor weed, but I had actually at that point never seen it grown. Okay, and I'll never forget, you had that closet that you emptied out. It was like 6 feet by 2 feet, and maybe you put like 4-foot fluorescents in there.
I did. I had 8 of them.
8 of them. I didn't even think it was that many.
Yeah,
and
I had 4 on each end. It was like 8 feet. 8 feet by 2 foot. You're right. And then I used to have them on strings. Like this is 30 years ago, and it was really primitive. Now that I think about it, it's kind of embarrassing.
I don't think that's embarrassing, dude. I mean, I think that it just goes to show like how rudimentary knowledge was, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, is before the internet, you couldn't just hop on. I mean, a lot of times, like in my crew, like learning how to grow weed was like secret knowledge. Like you almost had to like become an indentured servant to someone to teach you what was up, And when I first started growing, I didn't know anything about electricity. I had to I plugged in a 1,000-watt light and the circuit blew. And I had to be like, well, why did that happen? It's like now the stuff that just seems on it, like easy and basic and is easily available to discover, and you have all kinds of people to teach you. This is prior to that.
Yeah.
Where you're just trying to figure out how to, maybe you could buy a book or 2 books.
But I did buy a book, actually. I think it was around Halloween. All my Staten Island buddies, besides Gaby at the time, we went into the village for the parade. And we were like, hey, I want to go over to Union Square first and get a book. I told them what it was about. They laughed at me. How to grow marijuana.
Was that Sam by any chance? That laughed at you?
Yup, Sam, Kevin, Johnny Wheels, Jerry.
Johnny Wheels.
Okay, all these guys laughed at me. As soon as that first crop came in, they were all knocking on the door. Where do we get this stuff? How do we do it? And I was like, at that point, I was like, just like Notso Dog said, not so fast. I have to get it. I'm the one that you guys laughed at. you know. But then, you know,
What matters is who laughs last.
we're all laughing still.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I wanted to say is, when I met Nick and Cosmic, it was in this group on Reddit, Craft Marijuana, and the group is basically all about, you know, showing photos of what they consider craft flower. And sometimes in the group, you know, if it's a home grower and the stuff doesn't look perfect, they'll say, oh, you know, we can't include that because it's not craft. And if it's a much bigger garden, you know, like hundreds of lights or something, they're like, oh, that's too big, it can't be craft. And I made the argument that what makes cannabis craft is how it's grown. If it's grown with love and the intention to grow the highest quality product, then I consider that craft. And I use you and your first garden as an example because I remember that weed. And so, first of all, if you remember weed 30 years later, that shit must have been good, right? And we could, if you held it up,
about, like, the one in the little closet, or
the closet.
one
No, the first stuff you
set
grew.
up in the kitchen?
No, the closet.
Closet.
Okay, we're under those fluorescent lights.
Yeah.
Okay, because you could hold those buds up to the light and see straight through them. Okay, but when you smoked it, that shit tasted really good and got us super baked, and you grew that with love and the intention of producing the best flower that you could. And so I think that's the greatest example of craft cannabis that's grown with love. And you did that, and the proof is that you inspired me, Sam, Johnny Wheels, and all those guys. They wanted to grow too because of what you did. Like, you inspired a tremendous amount of people. And so, you know, not to kiss ass too much, but thank you, partner.
I really appreciate that. You know what I remember out of that first round the most? That I learned about bugs. Instantly had a crash course because I took soil from straight outside. No. Had no clue. Because you couldn't, like, you could go to the store and buy it, but I didn't have the money.
We didn't know about Ross yet. We didn't even know about him yet.
Ross yet. Exactly. We knew about Kmart. Okay, they sold soil. Could have gone there, but I didn't want anybody to know that I'm buying soil.
And you didn't even know that it wasn't a good idea to dig up the soil from outside. Like, we just didn't know.
Next thing I knew is I'm battling spider mites. From like 1 month in, I'm battling spider mites, and I'm like, and I fought them off. But it's all right. So we got that round in. I think there was maybe one round in that room. That's it. And then it was moved to the kitchen, and that's where the RFK seeds went in.
Well, tell us about the RFK.
So June, Gaby and I in RFK with the future Albany crew that's there, and we're searching a lot for bud. This is my perspective of the show that day. Okay, hot, really hot. Nobody can find any bud. Who comes back with bud? Gaby. Gaby's got a 1/4 ounce of, looks like greenhouse bud. Like, kind of moist still, kind of rolled up, looked like a cigar almost. But in that shape, you know? But like, just, all right, so in that bag there were, I think, maybe 5 seeds, something, or, right? Or maybe there was 7 seeds. You got some, I got some. I don't remember.
Oh, I didn't get none. You didn't give me any of those.
I got
seeds.
them all. And I know we fought over them. I was like, I'm taking them. So I remember I had these 3 distinct different skunks that came out of the bag. The 1, 2, and 3. First one, we'll say the RFK 1, was very much like a hash plant. The number 2 was kind of sweet smelling, really nice buds, but it had there were skunk plants. And then the third one was fruity. I don't know. We lost that one right away, but the other two survived for a few years. They were nice plants that we had. We're starting, like an indoor stuff.
Again, I can still taste that weed today. I have a hard time remembering like conversations and certain events, but I remember what that shit tasted like, and it was amazing. And the reason why I just wanted to mention it quickly is you grew that shit for years, and
maybe like 5 years I grew it.
Yeah, so
until I got seeds from Amsterdam, and once I came back, I ditched it.
I mean, maybe you go ahead, dude. You speak.
No,
I just have a question. I want to know how you kept plants around for 5 years back then. I'm just curious what your process was.
I learned to clone,
okay.
Just like everybody else. I learned to cut clones. I was reading books, you know what I'm saying? Taking every bit of knowledge that I could get out of a book. And then I was hoping to get into the horticulture system at Bronx Community College. And I got in, but I didn't stay in that because it was really hard to commute like 2 hours from the other side of the city. So I cut that out. But so like I just learned and read everything I could on my own.
Well, do you remember like what process you used for cloning when you were first doing it? Like, were you using any sort of like hormones for the roots, or had you discovered like
you were using
that point?
Oasis, right?
Ross was already in our life at this time.
I wanted to bring that up. I wanted to get into Ross, but I'll quickly answer the question. Is we used Oasis cubes and dip and grow.
Okay. Cool.
Exactly,
yeah.
right.
Yeah. Same thing as now.
Yeah. So
some technology advances, some doesn't too much,
I was never around then, so I'm just curious. It's very fascinating to me.
I mean, one thing that people should know, I think, is like these stories are, I mean, at least for me, and I'm pretty sure it's the same for these guys too, is when we started smoking, like the two kinds of easily available weed were brown Mexican and green Mexican. And there could be various levels of compression or various levels of quality or seed, but that was kind of it. So stumbling upon better weed or stumbling upon bag seed, right? Like I think back then, the only two places I knew how to get good weed were literally Grateful Dead shows and if you wanted to go to Amsterdam. Right. And most of my friends went to Amsterdam first because it was literally the only source of seed that anyone had any idea how to get that wasn't Mexican. Because in the 90s right then, it was sort of like, I don't know about New York. I know Gabby had some like, Jamaican experience, but like in Chicago, it was like there wasn't any Thai or Colombian or Panamanian. Like all that stuff was from a different era. There was Mexican. And so Kind Bud was basically anything of any quality that was better than the Mexican. I mean, that was pretty much like there was a huge range of, and so, yeah, you would go like what he just said, you would go before shows and you would scour the parking lot, trying to find somebody selling better weed than you had.
So that's the quote of the century right there. Kind Bud was anything that wasn't Mexican.
Yeah, 100%.
Put that shit in quotes right there.
Anything that wasn't Mexican. I'm like, even like Gabby said, like
it's homegrown. Kind Bud was
Kind Bud could be like
grown in the States.
I want $55 for this eighth, and you hold it up and you can see through it, like Gabby said, and you would still take it because it was
beg for more.
Homegrown Kind Bud.
Mexican, exactly. You had to pay out the nose for it.
Yeah, and this is obviously 5 or 6 years before the start of the internet or Overgrow or any of like the ways that people could get online and learn. There was maybe 2 or 3 or 4 books and High Times. That was pretty much the start. And if you were blessed enough to have one friend that was doing it and you could like watch what they were doing and see and get some tips, however horrific those tips might be, it was sort of like an entryway to get in because the knowledge level was so rudimentary,
Yeah.
It really was. It took a while.
Well, you'd be hard pressed to find any swag anywhere. I remember that was all that was around.
I wish I had all those seeds from my childhood. Oh my God. that I used to throw out the window because I used to have to, like, my oldest daughter, I had to, like, go on the internet.
Did you
and
get
show
muted,
her.
Francis? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I hear you.
I hear
Okay.
I hear everybody.
I don't hear anything.
Well, everybody can hear me but you. So
Yes,
it's
you'll have to check out the show later.
you.
no, but
Sounds like you guys hear everything, but I don't.
Yeah, I had to Google what
I hear you.
brickweed looked like, right?
Brickweed.
Brickweed, so I could show, like, I have a adopted daughter who's 26 and she grew up in Mendocino County, so she just never seen it. And I had to show her, like, because when I was trying to explain to her that, like, when you got a sack, you had to break it up and you had to take out all the stem and all the seed and all the funky bits so you could get a pile that you could roll into a joint, she was, like, looking at me all weird.
Yeah.
Because she grew up in the era of, like, seedless and, like, everybody knew what they were doing, you know? And that's the point I wanted to make, is that, like, in the very beginning, nobody knew what they were doing. Even the most rudimentary knowledge made you seem like a wizard, right? And you just had to, like, I mean, I would get, like, Jorge Cervantes's, like, Indoor Marijuana Gardening or Mel Frank's book, and I would just read this, you know, like, I learned everything I know about electricity just from trying to, like, figure out how can I plug in this dehumidifier and this light and not have my circuit pop. So that I just went, like stuff that seems basic now, it was not basic then, in my opinion. Everybody had to, like, start on this thing and then figure it out and then figure out a few more things and then figure out a few more things, you know? And so, yeah, like he was just saying, I'll shut up after this, but bag seed found in a sack of weed on the Grateful Dead lot that came out of Kind Bud, super valuable.
Yeah.
Not Mexican. Better weed.
Those seeds that we got from RFK led to getting the Chem Dog from Greg eventually. Really lucky to get at the time.
I mean, I don't remember the story like that, but that's again, okay, we should maybe just fast forward really far since you're talking about this and then go back, because I know Notso Dog is only able to stay for a little while and he's going to want to be part of this conversation. But the way I remember this story is I gave him the skunk that I acquired by trading the Francine. I never gave him the RFK. As a matter of fact, I never even had the RFK.
I know, but I traded him.
Oh, so that's how you got it?
When we
I thought I gave it to you.
When we went to the fish show?
Yeah.
Fish show.
It was Fish at the Roseland Ballroom.
Right. Okay. After that, I went up to see him in the Hamptons. Okay. And I traded him for a cut. I went up there with Sam, and we drove up. I gave him an RFK cut, and the skunk cut was another cut. And I got the Chem. I gave him two cuts, and I got the Chem.
So you see, again, I'm glad we're talking, because the way I remember the story, and honestly, you're probably right. Okay, I'm always the first to admit that I'm wrong, is that I traded him, and then I thought I gave you the Chem Dog, but you probably had it already. You know, because I was already in California.
You gave me the Super Skunk.
See, I think I gave you if that's the case, that I gave you the skunk and the Chem Dog. Because here's the quick end of the story. There was a guy from Virginia that I met at the Warfield, and I smoked the Francine with him. And he wanted the Francine. Okay, so I drove the Francine across country, and I traded him for a few clones, including the VA skunk. Okay, it wasn't the Super Skunk, it was the skunk from Virginia. And that was the plant that I ended up trading with Chem Dog for the Chem Dog. I traded him, and hope maybe we can get him on the show too. I think his memory is probably as bad as all of ours, so we'll have a different story. Yeah, so, and I thought, I gave you the Chem Dog, but maybe I did or I didn't, I don't know. Like, you could have traded him the RFK for it. Yeah, exactly. You might have actually gotten it before me because you lived out there. And, like, I'm thinking about it.
And I think
and what happened was, you were responsible for me making the deal with him for the Chem Dog. Because, like, I was out east for that brief period of time. We went to that fish show. But, like, you became friends with him more than I did.
But I think at the time, it was like, I didn't have a cut available. I had it, but it was flowering, and I was waiting. I don't know if I was waiting for them to root, or you didn't want them that they weren't rooted, or something. Because I remember you asking me about it, and I said, I hope he's not mad at me. I'm like,
about the RFK?
No,
or the Chem Dog?
Chem, because I didn't have one rooted.
Yeah.
And I
I remember that.
Yeah. You could ask Greg if he's got one, you know, because I don't remember exactly.
I think that's the way it went down, because I remember asking. So you did have it. That's the deal. Yeah. You had it before I did, and I asked you for it, and you weren't able to give me a cut, but you encouraged me to make the trade with Greg, and then that's what I did.
Right, because
I've been taking the credit for giving you the Chem Dog for years, bro.
Yeah, I mean, the funny part about weed history like this really is that most of it starts with just small groups of friends doing things that nobody has any idea will be important or anyone will care about later.
Exactly.
And then a long time later, people start asking for very specific details, and people's memories are different, you know?
It's nice to reminisce, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you know, this is like way fast forwarding, but like when I met Gaby, he gave me a skunk and the dog and the Chem Dog, and I thought for years and years and years, because that's how we talked about it, that it was the skunk from Virginia. And then like a year or two ago, I almost said his name, but Skunk VA was like, no, I think that was a different super skunk. Maybe he would have given him, because I think we lost it right before Gaby met me. And so you can hear stuff, and you can have stuff that just seems normal because your buddy told it to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so there was a skunk from Virginia, okay, which got lost before I met you. And then I had gotten seeds from Sensi. So those were the super skunk.
And I want to throw something else out there for Klopp too, is that, so there's this, we'll fast forward or whatnot, but
everyone wants to talk about the sour.
But the sour, I mean, essentially the sour story, right, is that there was these gentlemen that were getting sacks off of Weasel, right, over the course of probably like an entire year, and they would anytime they found seeds, right, they would hoard the seeds, and it seemed pretty clear for a long time that Weasel, you were growing the Chem Dog and the Voss skunk, and then all of a sudden it comes up that like you're like, no, I was actually growing the RFK1 and the RFK2, and I might have had this other super skunk, and I had the Voss skunk, and I had the Chem Dog. And do you even remember, what were you growing in 1994?
I had probably 10 different strains going.
Yeah, see?
Easily. More. Let me see.
So all those ones that I mentioned you had, right? You had a couple RFKs.
Yeah, he had all those.
Big Bud. I had NL. And no, wait, what year are you talking? Which year?
94.
Yeah, okay, so I'm already back, right?
Yeah,
I'm already back from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got Big Bud, Oasis, NL5, Nigerian, and the NL. I've got the Super Skunk.
Yeah, the Super Skunk.
Okay, the RFKs are now they're deleted. Okay, as soon as I came back from Amsterdam, those are gone. But before that, I was growing RFK1 and 2, and with the Chem, because I got the Chem from Greg, and I had the sister plant, the first sister plant, whatever he had, and I didn't have that for long. I let that go. Now, also, at this time, I had a room with right after coming back from Amsterdam after the first round. So now I make my seeds and stuff. Now I got a room of 100 going of the Chem times the Northern Lights.
Because what I don't know if this is true or not, but what the story that I was told, I mean, I think I can say their name, like by Vondo and Swell, is that they were getting sacks of weed off you all 1994. And then anytime they got a sack off you that they found a seed, they would just put it in like a little bot, like everybody did in the 90s or whatever. They would just have their little stash of like seeds I found in Hetties or whatever, right? Or good nuggets.
In a film canister.
Whatever, yeah, little box, little this, top of the sock drawer. Everybody did it, you know. It was like the most standard thing, and nobody labeled them carefully. It was just like good weed for later, right? And they said they gathered like 12 or 18 seeds just over the course of a whole year of buying bud off you. So it wasn't.
They did.
Yeah,
They did.
and so it wasn't.
They got more than that. Okay. In fact, Mike and I had a conversation, not a text back and forth about like he reminded me, and this is how we were talking. Like, hey, you see one side of the story, and I see another side. And he had to point out to me, and I had to sit there and think about it for like 2 fucking days. And I'm like, you know what? He's right.
That's exactly why we're talking that. I have that moment nonstop.
I was like, because it wasn't important to me that I gave him the bag of seeds, but it was so important to him.
Yeah.
So it left an impression on him. I was just like, I got fucking 100 seeds already. And these seeds I don't want to grow because they have tendencies to be hermaphrodites. We were all struggling at this point of like, these RFKs are causing problems. You know, like they Hermy, you get fucking seeds, you don't want to fuck up. The thing is, I don't want to fuck up the genetic pool. You know, I'm reading in the books how bad it is, you know. So I was trying to like, no, I don't want that for a breeding program, you know, because that shit was on my mind about breeding already.
So,
Yeah.
Notso Dog, that's the way Bondo tells the story. I recently listened to a podcast from AJ, and he tells the story a little bit differently, and he gives Weasel here more credit. And I believe that this story is more accurate. But you know, then we'll see what Mike says. What he says is that he was buying the sour diesel from Mike, okay, or whatever I think maybe AJ actually named it that. I don't know what Mike was actually selling him at the time, but AJ was saying that Mike was selling him the sour diesel, and that down the line they found those seeds, and that they planted those seeds because Mike wouldn't come off of a cut. You know, so
I mean all those things could be true. I mean,
right.
really.
But the point, my point is that the original sour diesel was from Mike, and Vondo takes credit for it because you know he found the seeds. It's like,
I mean, the story that I was told, and everybody, and and obviously we got Klopp on, so he can differentiate, is that these guys were buying seeds or buying sacks of weed, and they would get
sacks of weed.
They were getting sacks of weed, and that they would they would find some seeds in it because whatever Klopp was growing would throw beans on it every now and again. And then they had this sack of beans that they had collected over the whole course of the year. They planted them, and I guess they kept a couple that they called Diesel 1 and Diesel 2. And I guess they called it Diesel because that was like the slang for really good weed in that area.
Yeah.
Right? And so then apparently they took a sack of Diesel 2 and they gave it to this dude called Manny, right? And to differentiate it from other people's Diesel, because Diesel wasn't like a strain. Diesel at the time was just a name for fire weed, really. They wrote Our Diesel. And Manny thought that Our had an S in front of it, and apparently that's where the sour came from. So it's kind of like, what they told me was the sour was bag seed from weed that was bag seed from you.
It's
basically.
Sorry, you guys still there?
Yeah.
Like there was a lot. At this time there was a lot of sour being sold to these guys, as much as I could get rid of. you know, they wanted pounds, and some had occasional seeds, but I don't think that was the. They weren't buying a sour. They were buying the number 2 and RFK is what they were
Yeah.
buying.
They didn't say they were buying this. I think.
Here's the thing now. So now I had the Super Skunk too, and they were buying that. Okay. And I crossed the Northern Lights into the Super Skunk, and I had some weed, half a pound that I didn't want because it had a whole bunch of seeds in it. I didn't fucking realize that at the time, you know what I'm saying? Like, fucking, what am I going to do with a half a pound of bag of fucking a whole bunch of seeds? I took out what I want, jar like this, right? I fucking sold those guys that quarter pound of weed or half a pound of weed.
And
with
that's
seeds in it?
Only people that I could think got that bag of seeds. And they got so many, somebody got so many seeds. I don't even know if it was JJ, actually, to tell you the truth, or fucking Bondo.
JJ or
Thousands
AJ?
of sour seeds got out right there.
JJ or AJ?
Nope, JJ.
JJ.
AJ really didn't buy too much. He bought weed from me, but he didn't get too much. We would meet at the wetlands. But I more dealt with JJ because it was just easier.
So I think it's obvious when you look at sour that it has skunk heritage in it, right?
Absolutely.
But it turns out that you know, you had Neville's Super Skunk, and you had the Virginia Skunk, and you had RFK 1 and 2, and maybe like you had a lot more. You had a plethora of skunk.
Okay, at different times, but you have to also realize as soon as I was growing seeds from Amsterdam, there was no RFK 1 and 2 in the room because I didn't want any cross.
It wasn't worthy.
What's that?
It wasn't worthy.
Yeah,
it wasn't
worthy. Exactly. It's like I don't want this anymore.
I mean, there's a bunch of families of weed that exist only because they had a tendency to herm and throw accidental bag seed.
Yeah.
I mean, accidental bag seed is like, you know, like as much history as I've done, you trace it back and you trace it back, and then it turns out that it's some accidental bag seed. There's a lot of, for all the intention we put into breeding at times, accidental bag seed in the 90s is how like 70% of cannabis stories begin, in my opinion. You know, it's a big component. And we used to think they're so bad, and now I think of them as like the biggest gem ever because they gave us all this stuff on accident that we didn't realize.
You can make them, you know, if you want to do that. You know, it's not a problem. Stress out your plants.
Yeah,
I guess it really
wasn't hard to
depends
do
on
back
what's
then.
throwing the pollen. You know, if it's an actual herm or if it's, you know, nanners from stress or something.
Yeah.
Because as far as I know, you know, when you create your own feminized seeds and you're stressing out the plants, you know, whether it's chemically or what, you know, it's very similar to, you know, a plant getting stressed out and throwing nanners.
I mean, one thing that should be mentioned is that I think that like herms, and I'm maybe like on a tiny percentage on this level, but I think herms, like a lot of people despise them because they want to grow seedless, but that was like a very effective like breeding method for cannabis forever, right? Like if a male died, if something happened, a lot of genetics hermed because it was another way for to make seed. And we only decided like sometime in the 80s or whatever that we wanted seedless. So all of a sudden we started trying to breed out this trait that had been in cannabis for God knows how long. Could be thousands of years. And when everyone grew seeded, right? Or you're importing seeded weed, herms didn't matter because seeds were normal. It was only when we started growing seedless for ourselves that we decided that like, this is a pain in the ass. Can we breed away from it?
I always would think that the farmer would yank the male plant out and only selectively bred.
I mean, I actually think like for a long time too, like the story of American weed, right, is that all this seeded sativa work came in as bud, whether it was Panamanian or Colombian or Mexican or Thai, and that like the Afghan stuff came in as hash, if you even saw it. So in the beginning, it was all sativa stuff because that was the only stuff that you had buds that you were going to pull seeds out of.
Yeah.
You know?
But
And,
somebody went over to the least.
Because the rest was turned into hash.
Yeah. And just wasn't shipped over. You know, like in import weed had free seeds that came along with it. I never got any seedless weed from import. Like sometimes I'd get Mexican that was green and only lightly pressed, and it would have few seeds, but it still had them.
Yeah.
You know,
As far as they were concerned, they were still getting the money for the weight.
yeah.
You know,
I mean, most of the
didn't
weed,
matter if it had seeds in it.
I mean, most of my high school, it's like, you know, green Mexican was the nice stuff. Like super compressed brown Mexican was the norm, at least for us. So that was like, I don't even know if I would have been able to get good weed regularly, would I have even started growing. I think most of my friends, and this is probably true for Gaby and Klopp or whatever, you started growing weed because you wanted access to better weed than you could find.
You're right, because like occasionally I would come across some like Florida citrus, you know, it was nice, but I couldn't find it all. Yeah, so and when I did pay it, I had to pay, you know, back then like $40 for a quarter. You're like, what? You're like, what? Now you pay $40 for a quarter.
Hey, Notso Dog, I know you have to leave soon, and I want to get one topic out before you do. So it might sound like it's a little off subject, but you gave me the nickname Staten Island.
Yeah.
I got to let you know, I don't know if you've heard, I'm not very happy about that.
Well, I mean,
Staten Island's a fucking shithole.
Yeah,
it really is. You know,
it's,
so you
it's your shithole. And
thanks
the thing
for reminding me. I was born in Brooklyn. And I spent my last year. Hold on, wait. The first time I ever grew weed was in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So
let's
take that.
Let's just rewind a second. When you're telling canna stories, because I do a lot, right? It becomes difficult to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, right? Because not that you want to lie, but you're talking essentially about illegal shit. You might not. How do I put this the right way? A lot of people do not want to be public figures, right? Yeah. They don't want their name out there, right? You don't want to out your friend if they want to have privacy. They might have moved on. They might have a different job.
I don't blame you for giving me a nickname, but Staten Island.
You know,
is it like the first thing that came to your head at the moment when you were talking?
I actually, if you really want to blame, oh, I almost said his name. If you really want to blame it, who I got it from was when Skunk VA was talking to the podcast about his story, and he kept saying, my buddy from Staten Island.
Oh, really? All right, I'm going to blame him.
And then, I mean, him and I can mutually share blame for popularizing, you know, and all that. But it's kind of like, yeah, it's, you know, you're just trying to talk about people, and a lot of times, like, you know, you stop because you're so used to saying someone's name and you want to protect someone's privacy, and maybe they don't want their real name out there or whatever, you know, so they so yeah.
Handle
My point in bringing this up is the Weasel. First of all, we'll have to talk about how he got that nickname, because that might, I mean, that's pretty shitty too. But he's the real Staten Island. He was growing first on Staten Island. He lived there before I lived there. He lived there after I lived there. He was the man on Staten Island.
Let me ask these other two guys a question. Hold on. Let me ask these other two dudes a question. Cosmic and Nick, do you guys know what AJ's real nickname was?
No, I don't.
Asshole Joe.
Asshole Joe.
That's AJ. Asshole Joe.
Old Joe.
You know, not so. The thing about nicknames is that most of the time you don't pick them yourself. They are put on you by people in your circle or your friend group.
That's what I'm talking about, bro. You put this nickname on me. I thought we were good.
Well,
now you're calling me like Staten Island.
At the time
at least you're
that
not
I was
Asshole Joe.
At least you're not Asshole Joe. I mean, luckily for AJ,
the Weasel.
AJ is a common enough nickname that people probably don't think it means Asshole Joe. but it does. It means asshole Joe, right? So, in my defense, Gabby, right, when I was starting to talk about you, you had been retired from growing for some time. You were a legitimate business store owner. You know what I'm saying? And like this stuff was long in your past, and I didn't call you up and be like, do you mind if I out you on the internet for doing a whole bunch of like shady ass illegal shit a long time ago? Right? And so I just avoided all that by like talking about you with a name that wasn't traced back to you. And now that you've decided to say your name and show your face, you're stuck with it. But you know, that's kind of how it went. I'm sure dude, I keep wanting to say his real name. I'm sure Skunk VA thought the same thing when he was trying to figure out how to talk about you 5-6 years ago on the podcast, right? Without just saying, you know, oh, you know, and that,
Yeah.
you know,
I don't mind. I don't mind that I got a nickname. I just mind the nickname, like what it actually is, and the fact that like now I feel pretty stuck with it. You know, like
hence that's how nicknames work.
How do you
so tell us about yours. Why do people call you Weasel?
Asshole Joe fucking gave it to me.
Friend.
See, it's all shared pain. This is all.
There you
This
go.
is what it is. It's all
And
shared
the
pain.
reason he gave it to me was because I was like a horde with all the fucking sour.
Bro, it's so funny. Like he like brags on his podcast that like he sold this shit for like $1 million a pound. You know that he used to get like $1,200 a pound, or not $1,200, $12,000 a pound. What's something just ridiculous off the chain, you know? And he calls you a weasel.
Yeah.
Well, that's why he was
actually, you know, he's on my way from where I live in another state to come to this house. And I told him last week I was coming by. He didn't pick up this morning. So, I didn't get to see him. I was going to make a stop.
I mean, yeah, he used to sell, you know, he used to sell tops for $1,000 an ounce and bottoms for $500 an ounce.
Yeah.
And,
so
and the weasel here wasn't getting paid a fraction of that.
No,
right?
No. I was, like.
How much do you think you were getting for it back then?
What, an ounce?
Whatever. Or both.
For an ounce, straight up, I was getting 400 for all the way up. If I had 10 pounds of it, I was getting 400 an ounce. All the way up. That's why, like, I didn't cut. They were like, yeah, but then they would turn around and double it or whatever. Joe says I'm selling it for 800. I'm like, whatever. I don't have to deal with it. Okay?
And
just
that's
give me
the
my
other
money
thing
and walk away.
that people should know is that, like, back then, weed like this was gold because it was so rare. It was so hard to find. It was like, I mean, growing up in Chicago and stuff, like, he's passed now, but like one of Gabby and I's mutual friends that I grew up with, he used to, like, you could go up to a spot and you could offer a doorman $100 and he'd be like, fuck off. And then you could pull out a small nug of really nice indoor and hand it to him and he'd be like, oh man, you're getting in. Right? Because it was like currency. It was rare. It wasn't easy to get. It wasn't it wasn't easy to, even if you knew someone, right? Like, I'll tell a story from my past. This is how valuable stuff was, right? I might have only been 3 or 4 people away from a grower, okay? And I knew who they were. But that grower would sell their herb to a friend, and that friend would go through and, like, pick out nug by nug the nicest half pound that they wanted out of that herb. And then they'd sell it to
You're not going to out him here? You did before.
Huh?
You've already outed him on your podcast.
Oh, man. And then they would pick out, and the next person that get it would pick out all the nicest pieces they wanted for theirs. So when I would get it, it would be like, you know, a $50 bag of smalls. But it was still better than Mexican, so like every nug was gold. Didn't matter the size, didn't matter where it was from. The fact that you could get it, like that you had access before it ran out, was just part of it. You know, now it's like we're drowning in, it's like a sea of boof everywhere. We're just drowning in like enormous waves of weed. But like back then it was like, it was currency. It was hard to get.
You said it was like gold, but gold wasn't worth $400 an ounce back then.
No,
It wasn't.
You know, like we were always like, it's worth way more than gold.
If you had the money, you could get gold. Where if you had the money, it was not guaranteed you could get kind bud. I mean, part of the reason why, like that story in the beginning of like Gaby and Weasel walking around the lot looking for herb before the show, was because dead shows used to be one of the most reliable places you could stumble upon someone selling a sack. I got him excited.
You have people coming from all across the country, gathering. Somebody across the country was growing weed, some from somewhere.
Most people on Dead Tour were pretty poor, and they needed a way to get from show to show, you know, and they needed to make money somehow. And so one of the traditional ways people would do it is like they're like, oh, if I bring X amount of herb with me, I can sell eighths and quarters and half ounces and fund my whole run.
Absolutely.
Right? And so there was people that were going to do that, and you're walking around the lot trying to find someone that was like that. And then once people figured out who they were, that person could sell as much as they wanted that day because it was so rare.
Mike, I have a question for you. How much do you think it affected your decision in letting us stay at your house that couple of days that we had good weed? We had no money, but we had good weed, right?
It was life changing, you know. You know, like it put me back on the on the dead lot.
I mean,
yeah,
just to tie it in, right? Chem Dog, okay? The whole Chem story starts with him buying a sack of weed at a dead lot in Indiana in '91, and that same summer, Gaby.
I thought it was Colorado.
And
no, it was Indiana.
It was at Deer Creek. And Gaby and that same 91 tour, that same summer, Gaby and Weasel walking around, you know, the RFK, which is obviously in, you know, on the East Coast or whatnot, you know, RFK Stadium looking for weed. And they found a sack of weed that Bag Seed came out of. And that was like on the same summer tour. So that was the standard. Was people from all over America would go on Dead Tour, and you could bump into Florida people, Colorado people, California people, Montana people, New York people, and it was sort of like a cross-section, and it was also anonymous because you didn't know if you were going to see that person ever again, you know? But in all honesty, I mean, like, just real quick, Weasel, like, if you could have bought seeds in America, would have flown to Amsterdam? Like, I literally left the country to go to Holland.
You know,
so I could find seeds.
I might have gone anyway because, like, for the culture, like, I like to travel a lot, and I've been to a lot of places. So, yeah. At that time, I'd already been to Europe in my life a couple times. So,
but you wouldn't have brought seed back. You wouldn't have taped the seeds to your package.
No.
Okay. No. You told that story on another podcast.
Yeah, I mean,
you taped the seeds to your podcast
package. Yeah, I mean,
package.
That's the thing is that was where, you know, I mean, when Gaby and I first became friends, it's like we used to pour over those old catalogs of Neville's Seed Bank and
like
Sensi.
We would look at them too. I would look at them. We'd look at that.
Yeah, you'd memorize.
The super skunk. You'd have the garlic bud.
Yeah, you'd have different favorites. You'd have different dreams about going over there and which ones you'd grab when you were there, because there was just no access. So you were just trying to figure out a way that you could get some. And I only knew how to get it in Holland and Dead shows. That was pretty much it. Dead shows were like the open air market.
But see, in Holland, before Holland though, like 7 or 8 years prior to that though, I think it was actually 88 or 89. There was Operation Green Merchant.
Yep.
And there was a bunch of growers out in California. In fact, all the top growers were out in California growing these skunks and stuff. And when that went down, they all went over to Amsterdam and set up business. So there were strains here in this country that were being nicely picked over,
Yeah.
you know?
They weren't being distributed. It wasn't as, like,
It's just,
not just
being
anybody
hauled.
could go and get them.
like I
You
said,
had to know somebody.
before the internet, it was literally like the best way to find better weed. I would say probably the best way in America to find better weed at that
Yeah,
point was to
better
go to a
quality.
Grateful Dead show and wander around and make friends and hope somebody you
Shit was-
backed into. Gabby just left, but like when I first met him, I'll tell a story real quick before I gotta go. There was this weed that he called the Big Sur Holy Weed. And there was these guys on Dead Tour that sold Big Sur Holy Skunk and Big Sur Holy Haze, right? And Gabby said the smell was so distinctive that, like, if you walked by someone in the lot that had Big Sur Holy in their fanny pack, not only could you tell that they had good weed, but you were pretty sure it was the Big Sur Holy because of how it smelled. And there was a
And Gabby would always say they were connected. Oh, they know somebody from the Dead family.
but yeah, that was kind of like that was the
I
thing.
used to get that weed from him, and it was in little wax paper bags. You remember that?
Yeah. They gave them to me in wax paper bags.
Like sandwich bags for lunches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, sandwich
That's
bags.
why it smelled so bad.
Because it just
that's why
exploded out of there.
That's why everyone knew you had it, because you were fucking reeking. They
But
gave you
that-
these stupid sandwich bags. Yeah.
I apologize.
59
I
minutes.
gotta take my daughter to. She has a late
We'll do
start
more
today.
soon.
I gotta take. But it's good to see your guys' faces. You know,
Nice to see you too.
very much so.
Well-
And I will. We'll do it again soon. I promise.
Alrighty.
Stay tall, but
Okay,
yeah,
first of
I
all, let's
gotta
start
jump real
off.
quick.
Isn't that guy Notso Dog an asshole? No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. He's my bro.
He's
So-
good. He's good.
So one thing I wanted to talk to you about, we had skipped over it because I knew that Notso Dog was going to want to talk to you about this hour, was when we used to go to Ross's, East Coast Hydroponics. And the first thing I want to say is I'm trying to get Ross to do the podcast, and he tells me that nobody wants to hear his story and that he doesn't like the way he sounds when he talks. I can agree with one of those things. I'm only kidding. People want to hear his story. You know,
what
like
I can do is I'm here. I'm not far from him. If he's
Yeah.
still at his house, I can ambush him. It would be funny.
yeah, ambush him and we'll get him to
Tell him
talk.
to come here while I'm here this week and say, hey, come hang out. And if I get him here,
Oh,
I'll
shit.
try to give you a call.
Put a secret camera up and just live stream him without his permission. I'm only kidding. It's just, he was such a huge
what Notso
influence to so
Dog
many
said?
people.
But
What's
here's
that?
the thing. Remember back to what Notso Dog said. A lot of people don't want the publicity. They don't want the camera on them. And he's always been that way. If you can remember how freaky it was, like you go in there and he's like, the cops. And that was because of, maybe
Operation Green Merchant.
Yeah, like they came to his store. Nothing happened, but like some of his friends in the operation business there, they got arrested at that time for selling the equipment. I think
That's why I want him to tell his story, is because he had that history of going through Operation Green Merchant, and he survived. He continued, for many years afterwards. And he sold me, what's up, buddy? He sold me my first light. When I tell, so one of the things, Mike, I want to tell you, the purpose of me doing this podcast is that I want to document my story. More for me than for anybody else, because I'm forgetting it. And you see, like, when we talk, we remind each other of stuff, and, you know, the stuff happened so long ago. So I want to record this. Yeah, I think I do. I mean, I don't know if you call it the...
Kidding. I mean, like,
No, I know.
You know, we all forget. But listen,
My memory's not what it used to be, for sure.
Nobody's did.
You know?
Nobody's did. But it's nice that you want everybody to know, and then you ask people about it to help everybody. Like, it jogs my memory when you ask me questions, because I wouldn't think about it all the time either. Like, and it'd be like, yeah, that's 30 years ago. And I'm like, and you have to sit and you think about it. But if you think about this stuff, it'll come back. Just like what, like,
that's why I'm doing this.
Mike said about the bag seed, because it took me a while. Like, we came out of Ross's store, and I handed him those seeds. And I can remember now, you know? But you just think about it.
Yeah, I mean, so what I was saying is Ross is part of my story. You know, East Coast Hydroponics, that's part of my story. And he's our friend. You know, by the way, he doesn't have to be on screen. He can just do audio. You know, like, and, you know, as far as I'm concerned, he's a pretty famous dude. You know, like, he might want to, like, you know, try to be private, but it's already too late for that. Too many people already know him. You know, and
people know him.
Yeah, and, you know, at the time, you think, oh, my God, this guy's such a pain in the ass. Like, you know, he would leave a sign on his door saying, be back in 15 minutes, and you'd come back in an hour, and he still wasn't there. And, you know, going to the grocery store back then on Staten Island was shady as fuck, right? So, like, we didn't want to have to, like, go there, you know, 9 times, you know, to get our shit. And meanwhile, he was hanging out in the back with somebody else smoking weed the entire time while he has a sign saying back in 15 minutes. But like now, I mean, I honestly love the guy. You know, back then it was like, fuck you, this guy. And remember, he didn't even go by his real name. He went by Bill. You know, like he was so paranoid that anybody would know his name was Ross that he would call himself Bill. Or is Bill his fucking name? Do I have it backwards? I don't even know.
It took me years. I probably would say 10 years before I knew his first name. And the reason is because he used my kid's grandparents. The father was a lawyer, and he used him as a lawyer. And so I was referring to him in a conversation, and my kid's grandfather corrected me on his name. I was like, who?
So are you saying that I don't know what his real name is? Or is it no comment?
Yeah, right. You do.
But yeah. You know, I think he's an interesting part of both of our stories, right?
Yeah.
You know, so...
Yeah, he's a very interesting character.
I mean, I remember getting, like, Oasis over there, and we would buy all the down-to-earth guanos and shit from him. You know, so...
At that time when he had that small shop, we were into the guanos. Like, everything we were doing was back guano,
organic,
Seabird guano, and the Maxi Crop powder and Promix was state of the art.
So getting those bales of Promix was shady as fuck. What? You know, and that's why I was like, and he's not here. You know, like we borrow a friend's car, you know, to go over there and have this window in our day to get in. We're all like, got our heart racing that we're going to the hydro store to go buy dirt. And then the guy wouldn't be there.
Everybody sees you bring it into your house. Like,
oh, yeah.
What are you doing with that?
How do you hide that? We you know, yeah, it was like this giant bale. It's, you know, like a 4 cubic foot bale, 3.3 cubic feet. You know, those bales were giant.
Yeah.
You know,
you gotta like have a little vegetable garden or something out front where you're just like, oh no, this is for my vegetables.
At Mike's first place, there was no grass. There was no earth. He must have gone like to a neighboring woods to go get the soil that he grew in, you know, because it was cement.
I did actually.
There was a
pond. You remember the pond? I went over to Jack's pond and got it and brought it back.
Along with spider mites for your first crop.
Every other bug too. Probably it was. I think they were worms in soil.
Hey, like I said, I still remember that weed as being the best. You know, like no one on Staten Island at that point had better weed, right?
You know, I think I didn't. It was different. It was definitely different. It was. I would think like the seeds were probably high grade commercial Mexican. That's what I think it was. But it was kept short and flowered really, quick. And then, but when we got the RFK seeds, that was the best weed on the island by far at the time. Like, I couldn't find anything better. I was happy.
Well, the RFK weed, that was super nice. I remember that weed still too. And it sounds like you're proud of it. You bring it up a lot.
I mean, it's like the start, like indoor, like doing really indoor, and it, like changed my life, like completely. Like I realized not only you can make a living at this. This was when I was like, wow, like
that was the first time you realized that it was more than just personal smoke.
I don't have to go out there and swing a hammer anymore if I don't want to. I don't have to go in the cold and freeze.
When was the last time you grew a crop?
This summer. I did the sour and I did the chem. 91.
Nice.
I should let you guys ask some questions since me and Notso Dog dominated the show.
91, is that the chem that you guys remember from like the early 90s?
That's what I did this summer. The Chem 91 is the original Chem Dog from the 91. It's the same cut that's been going down the line.
They call it the 91 now to differentiate it from the Chem D and the Chem Sis and the Chem 4, but back then it was just the Chem Dog. Yeah. And I actually just called it the dog because we grew it organic, and I refused to call the Chem Dog Chem because I was growing organic at the time.
Okay. It actually probably indoor does better with chem, with salts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
that's what I think
too. That's why he called it that, because he couldn't do anything with it. Like it was struggling on him, and to get it to grow correctly, he hit it with Miracle Grow. That's what he told me, if I can remember.
No.
But that's a different story, I'm sure,
Oh, yeah, no. So I'll tell the story, too, since it's a part of both of our stories. When I went and picked up the cut of the Chem Dog, he was growing it hydroponically. I'll never forget, it was called the Emily's Garden. And it was like a 2x2 tray that had a wick that went to the reservoir below. And that was the first time I ever saw a hydroponic system was with him. And he insisted that you had to grow the Chem Dog with hydroponics because it just wouldn't make it if you didn't. It wouldn't survive. It's just such a hard plant to feed. And so that was the first time I ever saw a hydroponic system. I refused to accept it when he said that you can't grow the Chem Dog organic, and I just called it the dog, and I tried to grow it organic. And I did get flower that people thought was the best shit they had ever seen in their life, but that was because of the genetic. Okay?
Right.
That genetic was so awesome, even if you didn't do it right, you got something really good. Okay? Now, when I learned about using mineral salts and became open to it, and then grew the Chem Dog, then it was like, oh my God. Now I really got to see what the potential of this plant was, what the genetic potential of this plant was. It was a very difficult plant to feed, even with hydroponics. It didn't have much foliage on it, or doesn't have much foliage on it. And by difficult to feed with hydroponics, with the knowledge and products that we had at the time. You know, so the plant would want to yellow and lose all of its leaves before it finished. You know, and if it didn't finish, it wouldn't have anywhere near the terp profile it would have as when it did. So when we fed it with hydroponic nutrients, it would stay greener longer, and the plant could finish. And, you know, to me, it's night and day. Like, and so now I don't object to calling it the Chem Dog anymore, because on top of everything, it's something that encouraged me to be open to growing with mineral salts, where, you know, there was a period of time where I was like, nope, you know, it's got to be organic.
So I find the plant is very hard to feed also. I mean, it's got to have the pH just right. But, like, I do it in soil outside, and if I just go with straight nitrogen and fat guano and you know, the mixes that they have, you know, in the bags, the plant will struggle to get the proper nutrients even out of the ground, even if I've enriched it and everything. But once I add a few salts to the ground outside, I never have a problem with this plant.
So you're growing them actually in the ground?
In the ground, always. I don't put them in containers anymore. It's a seasonal crop. My soil is beautiful, you know, and I can go away, which is the main key. Not worried. Have a sprinkler come on once in a while. I'm going to Italy. I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll come back, and everything looks good. You got to trim. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Cut things back.
Really low maintenance.
This year is really nice. It was really nice. I have a 30 by 30 plot, and I do pretty good on it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
You know who I've been thinking about a lot as well? And I don't know if he would do the podcast, but our good buddy Keith, you know?
Yeah, have to ask him. He's very mysteriously, I don't know how often you talk to him.
I don't really talk to him that often, like maybe like not even once a year, but just to tell everybody else about him, Keith was or is a good friend of ours. He was part of the group that was growing, and I'm getting some weird sunlight behind me. Hope it's not too difficult. Fine. But anyway,
on you.
Like his dad was a pastor, right?
Yep.
Or a priest.
Pastor.
And he had some like conflict within him about growing. Okay, because you know it wasn't the holy thing to do, right? And so I'll never forget. I want to tell a story about Keith, and if you remember any stories, and I say this with all, I love the guy immensely, right? But so, you know, sometimes I would want to buy weed from him, and he would sell me these bags. They'd be really small, like really small buds. And one day I go, yeah, he was growing, but you know, and I thought that's just the way it was turning out, just small buds, right? So one day I go to his house, and we go to his basement to smoke, and he breaks out this fucking cola. It's like this, okay? I'm like, holy shit. I was like, I couldn't believe Keith finally fucking pulled off something just ridiculous, right? And he's like, yeah, what do you think? And so I smell it, and I'm like drooling. I don't remember what weed it was. You know, he's got to be on the show to ask him. It was just fucking amazing, right? But it was really dry. It's like, Keith, why is this shit so dry? It's like, oh, because I just, you know, have it sitting there. So he takes a lighter, and he's like going like this, like close to the bud. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, watch. Goes like this. And when that flame touches the bud was so dry, it fucking ignites like a fucking, like a candle. Goes right up. And he fucking takes the end and he goes, and he blows out the flame. So now it's no longer on fire. It's just like smoking like a cigar. And he's going like this with it. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Like, I mean, I'm like we were talking before, weed is so...
in that room.
No, you know what he said? He was sacrificing it to the god, because his dad taught him that you should always give a certain amount of money from what you earn.
So he was tithing
to the church.
He was tithing.
So he couldn't like just take the weed and give it to the church. And if he gave the money to the church because he was making good money, it would be like, where the fuck are you getting thousands of dollars from? It was just totally shady. So his way of giving it back to the earth was to light that weed on fire and just let it fucking smoke. I was so pissed.
That's funny.
You have any Keith stories or stories you want to tell about anybody else? Or anything else you want to talk about?
Man. Keith, I remember, like, people want to know is like, like, my first round with Keith was amazing. And last round. Because I went over the house one time and he yelled at me because I went over early in the morning. And I'm an early bird. He sleeps to 12. But this is where, like, the first batch of seeds that I did was with Keith when I came back from Amsterdam. We did 100 seeds in a room in his apartment. It was a pretty interesting journey with Keith. And occasionally I see, him and Ross and I used to go to a music festival all the time, but that hasn't happened in the last 2 years. Yeah, the best story is the one that Gaby told. Definitely, I can't tell.
I feel like we've kind of played around with the story with Sour Diesel. We told little bits and pieces, but I personally don't feel like I have a clear view of the actual creation of the Sour Diesel. Is that it was with Super Skunk and with Chem Dog, right?
Yeah, but the Chem Dog had already been bred to the Northern Lights.
Oh,
that's where that round of seeds with Keith.
I think you're muted, Gaby.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh,
yeah, now I can.
I was running my water bottle. So people have been saying it's the Chem Dog crossed with the Super Skunk. That's not true.
Okay, to a certain extent it is, but so let's play this out. So that's where, so now I've come back from Amsterdam and I have the seeds. So, I'm growing seeds and I like the Northern Lights, the structure and everything, the size of the collar, and I like the taste and everything. So I took a male of that plant, crossed it with the Chem. This room that I did with Keith is the 100 seeds. Okay, so it's the first batch. From that batch, I tell Keith, I like this seed right here. And we put the number 1. We put it into the cup. We grew it. 99 plants. Okay, that's it. Most of them got weeded out because they were males. We were looking kept the female. But out of those other seeds that I had out of the 100 seeds, I grew another batch. And I got a male from that same batch, and I crossed it with the Super Skunk. So that's Chem Lights times Northern Lights times Super Skunk. And that's where that bag of seeds that eventually got out that I said earlier, oh yeah, there's a whole half pound or a quarter pound of weed that got out that had seeds in it. We were talking about seeds.
So it's NL5 Chem or NL5 Super Skunk to Chem. Is that right, or?
And NL5 times
NL5
Chem.
is the tall one, no. It's the short
Or the NL.
NL.
Just Northern
NL
Lights.
Straight in. Just Northern
Number
Lights.
1.
And that was
Number
the
one.
Northern Lights that you grew out. It wasn't like, because like
From
the Chem
seed
Dog-
from Amsterdam.
It's what I got from Sensi Seed in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm. So it was like your own pheno that you had hunted yourself that you used to breed with.
Right, but that Northern Lights was bred to the Chem, and then from the Chem took the first generation of seeds, found the male, crossed it with.
And then it was your friend that bought the weed that had the seed in it that actually grew it out.
Well, I don't, like I wouldn't say that. Like he's got his seeds, I have mine. I'm growing the same seeds. Okay, this is how I feel like what happened. They got their seeds, I got my own seeds. I can remember going to the Catskills, and asshole Joe moved into the house across from where Vondo had at the time. So they had two houses side by side. And Joe moved in, and I gave him a housewarming plant for his house. And that was my cut of my sour that I had grown out seeds, and I liked this plant, right? Bondo says, or whatever Maxwell says, they did the same thing. So it's like, that's where I have my story at. Like, I don't really care. Like, if they say they want to claim it, they can claim it. I know the seeds.
Well, no, I thought AJ actually gave you the credit. Like in this podcast that I was listening to, he said that it was your weed and that it was being called the sour diesel and that you wouldn't give up the cut, and eventually they found seeds and planted those, and but he said that yours was the original one, and that then afterwards they grew some seeds, and so I felt like he was giving you the credit.
So when I went back to New York with that, I saw the Weasel shortly thereafter in Sheep's Meadow in Central Park, and I showed it to him, and he was so impressed with it that within 2 days he caught a flight to Amsterdam and took his first trip there. And when he came back, he had seeds with him, and those would be the seeds that would eventually potentially father the genetics that bore the sour. All of a sudden, it was just diesel, but now we're getting all these different things, and now everyone's like, dude, please just grow the diesel, like fuck all this other stuff, please, we just want the diesel. If you're a grower, like every time you try to show people something different, there's like one particular thing they want from you, and it's like you can show them the best thing in the world, they don't care. So he did eventually start growing diesel again, and but this time when it came out, there were some seeds, and by now, these guys who I had first introduced to the diesel had poached out the Weasel and found him because it was a small scene, So those guys were from Albany. So those guys got weed with some seeds in it. I got weed. I found one seed in it, and so that's kind of like where it all began with.
I don't listen to his podcast. I didn't listen to it.
It was something he did for someone else.
Yeah. But I would have tried to stop by to see him this morning. He didn't answer. It's nice to have him on.
Fucking asshole. Yeah, I'm going to see if he wants to come on too. I never really interacted with him much at the time. I was already out here and he was out there. I knew about him from you. So.
Yeah. I like him.
Sour
Are you guys
kind of floating around now? Gabby, you got to cut the sour diesel. Is that?
Yeah. So are you doing tissue culture, Gabby?
So the clones that I have, the original sour diesel had been tissue cultured from someone that I know that had been growing it for a long time, and then I got the AJ sour diesel.
Was it the sour? Like, was it the sour? Like, it was the sour?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really know what you grew, because we're living on different
coasts,
different sides of the. Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to talk to you about this after the show.
It's interesting with, obviously we got the original sour diesel here. We got, something that came from, the other seeds and everything like that. I wonder which sour was the one that, became super popular with everyone, that everyone had experience.
I mean, like we already know that even back then there was a few different ones, right?
I mean, it sounds like there were two main ones that ended up into like the hands of people who were calling it sour diesel, and it could have been either one, either from
it could have
Michael
it very likely was more than two.
For sure.
And then
for sure.
how does East Coast Sour Diesel fit into this?
Yeah.
You know? I don't know too much about the history on that strain, but you know, what we're talking about is already originating on the East Coast. You know,
right. So the West Coast, I believe, is the headband. But I don't have as much, you know, like Francis or Notso Dog would have been a better person to talk to about that, because he researches all that stuff, and he's probably already done, you know, a few talks about it if you look it back up. But yeah, and it's kind of weird, you know. It's actually more proof that, you know, it's kind of like lemon cherry gelato today. A lot of people just start to add their shit to the name.
Yeah.
You know, when they started calling the headband Sour Diesel, it's like just because that, you know, that was more popular than headband. You know, so and you know, I will talk to Notso Dog about it. The clone that I have, I believe to be the original Sour Diesel, and then I have the AJ Sour, which is actually something that he agreed to put his name on. You know, they call it the Philly cut. You know, he's put his name on a bunch of cuts. So, but you know, and now he has, you know, his whole AJ Sour line. You know, so now he has his own sour.
I mean, do you get royalties? I wonder. Is it like if somebody puts the Weasel on their jar, should I get royalties for that?
Unfortunately, I don't think he.
I
vote yes too.
Person, I swear to God, like
someone does that?
There's this guy.
Is someone doing that?
Hey, nice man, and he's got this sour that he says is sour. It's not the sour. I say it right now. It's not the sour, okay? But he's selling it as the sour and grown by the Weasel. And I'm like, and he comes to me, look, I says, I did this for you. And I'm like, I don't know what to say to the guy.
Wait, hold on. I did this for you, so where's my money?
Yeah.
You know, I'm like,
no, you're using my reputation to sell your weed, and it's like all a lie.
So I'm gonna meet with him soon again. I just don't have time right this minute. I'm gonna tell him.
Well, first of all, it shouldn't say grown by the Weasel, because now he's taking credit for
I'm not happy,
you know, saying
with
that, you
the
know,
product at all. I'm like, this can't be. This can't be. I don't know how to break it to him though.
Wow.
I'm just too kind-hearted in a way.
Because you like the guy till he did this.
You know? I think he's doing it. He says it goes to a lot of cancer patients. So I don't, you know, like it. I think it's going to a good cause. If he's doing that.
Well, cancer patients don't care that you grew it. You know, like that's marketing, calling it, you know, saying grown by the Weasel, because cancer patients just want medicine that makes them feel better, right? Like it doesn't matter to them if it's Sour Diesel grown by the Weasel. I think
the same cut of sour ever since you know, originally created it.
So my buddy here in the Catskills has it also, and he's from the Staten Island crew. Like it's kind of funny, like the guys from Albany lived here for a while, and then we came here, you know, into the Catskills, and it's really nice. But like, so this is kind of like Humboldt County in a way. That's what we say. Greene County is like the Humboldt of the East County in the eastern United States, like this area. A lot of fine bud coming out of here now. It's really nice.
It always was like. For the New York weed, that's where all the good shit was always coming from.
My friend, you know, I just ask him in the spring, can I get a cut? And I get it. You know, I get the cut that I want. Or I do seed, Cosmic. You know? Okay. What about you?
So your friend currently, he's kind of like the caregiver of your strain right now, right? So like you don't perpetually have a mother. He's the one who's taking care of it.
He's got it. Yeah. What about you?
That's
you
really
growing
cool.
anything?
I got quite a few things. I have something that's supposed to be Sour Diesel that I'd gotten back in 2020 from this breeder collective. I'm over here in California. It was this breeder collective in San Bernardino that just kind of disappeared. So I can't really trace the history back on what it is. The terps are extremely sour. I mean, as far as what I understand, what a sour diesel should be, it seems pretty close to it. But who knows if it's the real deal?
Right.
You know. But yeah, I mean, I have quite the collection. I've been learning a lot about tissue culture, about meristem tissue culture. So my focus right now is getting better at that, and hopefully creating a library of strains that I can kind of play around with whenever I'm ready for my next breeding project.
And you have both of the sours that I have currently in
Correct.
meristem, right?
Yeah, so I have the 2 sours I got from you, and then I have the one still that I had from 2020. And yeah, I mean, the meristem process it's very, very long. It's going to take a long time for me, and I'm still in the process of figuring everything out. I know it was a different show that we did, but I've successfully done the micropropagation. I've successfully right now at this point have extracted a lot of meristems, and I have them currently growing, getting to the point where they're almost at the height where I would be able to kind of do the same techniques that I use with micropropagation on those plants. So right now, my current process is connecting those two techniques together to be able to eventually have a plant that you can grow in a garden. So. But yeah, my collection is vast. I think I'm around 90 or so, and about half of those, if not more, are already just purely tissue cultured. Speaking of the Chem 91, I have that supposed to be on the way too, so that's pretty cool. I love sours. I love chems. Any kind of those strains where you're just like, it's not so friendly to to sniff it there, the terps. But yeah, I mean, it's been so awesome to be able to talk to you and hear where one of my favorite strains came from. Because I know everyone's a little bit different, with what they prefer, and I feel like it has to do with everyone's biology and like the chemical composition of their brains and what cannabinoids and terpenes that they react to. But I know personally, sour diesel is one of my favorites for just putting me in the best mood.
Yeah,
it's
me in a good
just
mood.
such a great mood enhancer.
I find I like smoking it better in the day when I'm working, and then the Chem Dog, because the Chem Dog would just couch potato me out. I'll be like, I gotta sit down.
Not soon enough. I haven't had any actual.
It's funny. It's funny because I feel the same way. Like people. And, Cosmic and Wolf, you can tell me your feelings on the subject, but people would always tell me how the sour diesel would wreck them. And for me, it was just never that potent, even when done properly. The comparison of the potency, not THC, but just overall potency to your brain, like the difference between smoking the sour or the Chem Dog, it's like it's night and day,
Yeah.
And maybe it could also have something to do with, if there was some more sativa in it versus.
I think that's what it is.
I don't know.
More sativa in it. Yeah. Are you growing too, Nick?
Yeah, I so I have like a little tiny home grow, and then just because where we moved, but I help manage a farm as well. So we got like 4 different flowering rooms, and we have I think we have like 108 or 116 different cultivars that we keep on hand now, but we're also moving to get some tissue cultures set up so that we can get all of those on culture, because keeping 108 strains on hand is it's difficult.
It is.
We got we have like 2 acres of outdoor that we do, so we try to like split up all those 2 acres between about 102 or 105 different strains per year.
And when you do them outdoors, how you doing them outdoors?
We do row crops with drip irrigation.
Oh, nice, yeah.
There's no protection.
We do like T-posts and trellising.
We're doing out like up here. We had like 35 of them this summer over on a farm, and we put them on skids and then on big bags, and then we just keep the brush back, and we bring water lines, drip lines to them. But I find that you have to be outdoors, and you're bringing the water from far. you got like we have a reservoir. It's a spring, so it's kind of hard really to run the drip line. So we feed it with a hose most of the time. We don't use trellises so much because like we're I don't know like far apart. We use large stakes and just kind of tie them up. You know, the trellises, like a lot of people like them in greenhouses, but I just find that sometimes it's not the ideal thing for me.
For sure.
Do either of you guys do anything to?
What was that, Gabby?
Well, so I mean, we have like 3,500 plants in the 2 acres.
Yeah.
So it's like putting stakes for each one of those would just be a little bit too laborious.
I know. Like I don't use a lot of stakes. I just use like one maybe. This year I didn't have to use hardly any. But we get enough wind. I feel like they strengthens them. And I don't have a problem with them falling over. And, you know, like this, the buds, they kind of just stay up. They're strong, the stems, you know.
What were you asking, Gabby, though, about, like, protection?
Yeah.
Do you guys do anything to protect them from the weather?
No.
Or, like, is it just grown straight outside?
Just straight outside.
Or something. Some people do, right?
We use, like, we use an electrostatic sprayer on the back of a tractor. And spray like biologicals and stuff to help prevent like botrytis and powdery mildew. And we're in Oregon, so like the hemp russet mites are everywhere. So we gotta battle those throughout the whole season too. And this year we didn't have much like thrips or spider mites or anything like that. It was just like the hemp russet mites and a little bit of powdery mildew towards the end.
I was thinking protection from the wind and rain.
That trellising. We get some pretty intense winds in the valley that we're in, so we have like probably three layers of trellis per row, and the rows are like it's like 2 rows down straight planted at like 5-foot centers per plant. Then you have the T-post just running along the outside, and then we'll just pull the trellis along the whole thing.
Yeah, you guys, the weather is a lot different out there than here.
I mean, it snows where you're at.
Yeah, but not far from you too, though.
And we get snow here.
Right, but it's far enough from where I live that I don't have to worry about it snowing on my plants.
Like, you know, like you guys that's a big business that you're in there. You know, we're just like small craft farmer here. That's it.
Well, that's funny that you say that because we had that discussion about what is craft cannabis.
I could never like, you know, once you get like above 40 plants for a single person to work, it's a lot. How do you do that? Like it becomes a full-time job. Like
it is.
And you already have one of those.
You know?
You already have one of those, right, Mike?
I have 2 of those. Family's another full-time job.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's like you're working a lot of hours trying to take care of this plant, and you're not getting as much as you used to get for it. So, like, I'm only going to grow, like, a small amount compared to what I used to sometimes grow. I don't care about selling it, you know? More about personal bud and giving it to some people that don't have it.
Yeah, Christmas is coming up.
We have to use a lot of automation and irrigation.
Yeah.
Because it's only 2 of us pretty much that are full-time there taking care of 4 different rooms of flower and a few different veg spaces because of all the moms that we have to keep around, and clone room. And but I think it's pretty fun. I like it, actually.
And you were in a facility too, right, Gabby? You were working in one?
I'm not anymore.
But you were, though. And what'd you think of, like, the large facilities?
So what I believe, and I said this before and I'll repeat it, is that I believe it's possible to grow on a large scale and grow craft quality cannabis. Now, it's probably less profitable, right? Because if it was more profitable, then more people would be trying to do it. But if what you're trying to do is, and we're talking about large scale, right? If you're trying to create a brand known for the highest quality, then you can't cut those corners, and you got to accept that, like, at least at first, it might not be as profitable, right? But I think if you go in there with the proper intention and love for the plant in a commercial facility, you can grow the highest quality product. And, one thing that I would say about this is in a commercial facility, they regularly have tools available to them that the average, craft farmer does not. Like the amount of monitoring and controls that are available to these larger facilities, it's an advantage. Yeah. Now, I think a lot of these facilities are overusing this technology and trying to push the plants too hard, and that's causing other problems. I think a commercial facility can grow as good of weed as anyone else can if they put the proper love and its attention. So when you have a commercial facility, you got to have enough people working there. If you don't have enough people working there, then all of a sudden corners get cut. But if you can have enough people working there, they can put more attention into it than in a situation where it's just like one or two people working, 4 flowering rooms. So
some of the flowering rooms are huge.
Well, oh yeah. I mean, the last place I was at, the flowering rooms, each of them had like 130 lights.
How many
I think
plants?
It was 117 lights, something like that. It was like 1,200 plants in every room, and there was 8 rooms plus the veg.
Yeah, we only have 12 lights per room and around 108 plants per room.
So I just wanted to just wrap it up, and is there anything else that you wanted to say, Mike?
I'm good. You got anything you want to ask?
Yeah. Any? Well, I'm going to talk to you for the rest of my life, so I can ask more questions. I'll give Nick and Cosmic a chance. You guys have anything you want to talk about?
I mean, I think I've asked every question that came to mind right now. It's probably just going to be a matter of just digesting, everything that we've learned today. Right. It's a lot of really cool cannabis history, especially strains that, that we all love, So
what's your favorite today? I mean, besides the sour, the diesel, like something else that you like?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, sour diesel, it's so hard to beat. Sour diesel. I love SFEOG. That's one. This is a story for another day. Actually, my buddy that I did this with about 15 years ago was at my house this weekend, and I asked him if he wanted to jump on this podcast. So that's maybe down the line we can hear the story from his perspective. But back in the day, him and his mom were this about 2011 or so, 2012. They started a cannabis club, so like a medical dispensary. They had all the paperwork done, everything. We were legal to grow at his house. We had a single room that we're taking care of, and at the time I was delivering pizzas. I had put all the extra money I had, because he still wanted to get money from that room, so we had to pay rent for the room that we were growing in. So I paid all the extra money I had for rent every month on that, and then all the equipment that we needed. But long story short, he ended up getting raided. It was a whole deal. Very interesting story too. Again, we were talking about it on Friday, so I'm hoping that we can get him on and get him to tell his end of that. But back to kind of what we were talking about, SFEOG was one of the strains that we grew back in the day. So I have that personal connection from basically the first time of me really learning how to grow, and then taking on a room with my friend. San Fernando has always just been one of my favorite OGs. And then as far as like kind of modern weed goes, another favorite, actually I'll do a shout out for 2 more strains. One is Blueberry Muffin from Humboldt, an amazingly fruity, almost too sweet.
Yeah.
When you're trimming up the plant, it's almost sickeningly sweet, but it's a really good nighttime smoke, that Blueberry Muffin, and I've used it for several of my breeding projects with some really interesting results. And then another one that I've been growing again since 2020 is Sugar Cane from In-House Genetics. Really, really good hash plant. Lots of frost on it, so perfect for making bubble hash or any kind of extracts and everything like that. So I'd say those are some of my top strains.
Nice. And you, Nick?
Oh man, I'm just because of like the volume of different strains that I've been exposed to over the past couple of years. Like they start to get muddled, but one that I really like because of the medicinal qualities of it for my specific usage would be like Miracle Alien cookies or the Mac 1 cut. That one, and then there's a cross of it where it was crossed to the in-house genetics slur cane, and that one's either called like Mac Slurry or Mac Flurry or Mac Daddy. But that one also it's just a huge yielder, and it's really potent. So those are always good for me. But then I do remember like Tahoe OG or San Fernando like SFV OG, or even just like OG Kush. Like any OG is I'm down with.
Yeah. Hey, you know that alien cookies? I used that in breeding. I liked it. It's nice. I actually backbred it into my underdog and used it to get a male.
Nice. We gotta end this pretty quickly. I just want to add to what you just said. I have a clone called the P85.
P85.
It's the Pluto times the E85, and I'm gonna send you a cut, Mike, to thank, or I could send it to your buddy that's holding on to your genetics till spring. But it's an amazing plant for growing indoors or outside. To me, it checks all the boxes, and I'll send you a cut. I love you, buddy, and I appreciate you doing
nice
this.
Meeting you guys. All right.
Super nice meeting you.
Yeah, great meeting you.
Gabby, you want to?
We'll talk
Thank
again
you for your
soon.
work too, by the way.
Listen, you guys.
Remember,
you
without
guys
you, we'd
are
have the
doing
sour
more
diesel.
than I ever did. You got how many strains each one of these got? And so much. Today, you guys are so much more advanced than I ever was, and still are.
We're standing on the shoulders of giants.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
like you guys went to school for it, right? You guys took courses.
I did.
Just reading.
Some.
Yeah.
Reading, and
right?
lots
you
of
can learn anything pretty
hands-on.
much by reading and just hands-on, man. As long as you can get somebody to show you something, in it. And that's really what it is. It's somebody to guide you.
Don't forget to leave the browser window open when we hang up so that this thing fully records.
Just hit leave,
and I love you,
right?
Mike. I'll talk to you soon.
Just hit leave.
Yeah, just
All
hit
right.
leave.
See you guys.
Yep.
See ya.
See you later.
Bye.